Gonna have some good times with good friends, making good memories. A little bit of sunshine and good vibes, yeah, that's all we need. And we ain't gonna worry, ain't in a hurry, everything is going our way. We're gonna have some good times with good friends, making good memories. Everybody's moving to the song on the radio. Little Stevie Wonder never hurt nobody's soul.
My name is
Something about lawn chairs out in the warm air feels like a sacred place.
Hosting research report reveal in collaboration with Uthingo Network as well as the other foundation. And allow me then to take this time, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the Seth Moketimi Methodist Seminary. Now the Seth Moketimi Methodist Seminary is named after Seth Moketimi, who was the first black president of the Methodist Church of Southern Africa. The seminary is a registered private higher education institution which is accredited to provide 4 qualifications, namely the higher certificate in Christian ministry, a diploma in theology, a Bachelor of Theology, and a Bachelor of Theology, an honors degree in theology, in Christian leadership specifically. And so, as the seminary, within the seminary is the Center for Black Thought and African Studies, which is a research center primarily focusing on centering African being. And that is to say, it looks to understand the realities of black people, wrestling with understandings of our culture, our faith, our social systems, locating them in their historical context with the purpose of understanding how those structures of society continue to shape the way we see the world. Now, through our research stream on decolonial alternatives, we look through decolonial feminist praxis to unlock liberating modes of African being. A flagship of this work is the Inclusive Theological Education Convening, which has been hosted by the Center for the past 2 years, which is a gathering of theologians, activists, artists, faith leaders, LGBTI rights organizations, for the purposes of reflecting and discussing, reflecting on theological curricula and looking for ways to make theological curricula that much more inclusive to the lived realities of queer people. Now, faith is a crucial role in shaping the attitudes of society in the ways in which, particularly in the ways in which they relate to queer lives. Faith is always central. Even the one who's only been to church when they were baptized as a baby, when more often than not, when confronted with issues of the realities of queer people, they will quote sacred texts. Often they will quote biblical texts. And so that underscores the way in which faith fundamentally shapes how we understand the realities of queer people. And the question that we still remain with as a Christian faith is how do we embrace, how do we express a theology that is as inclusive as inclusive of God's love as God is at the end of it all known to be a God of love. And so with these words, I welcome you to this gathering today, and we are hopeful that our engagements today will be very much fruitful. And so with those opening remarks, I would then like to call on Brian.
And that part belongs to me now. But anyway, nonetheless, welcome everyone. And I think on behalf of Uthingo Network, I would like to thank the other foundation and the Seth Moketimi seminary for, I think it's easy to take for granted this moment. And if you look at what is currently happening in the world, it is very commendable and important for us to acknowledge that we have in one room faith leaders, LGBTI people and civil society and parents in one room to speak about a research study which might not easily happen in other countries. So I think that speaks to the context in which we exist as queer people in South Africa, and especially also in the background of this progressive constitution. So I think we need to also acknowledge that today's discussion is not only about statistics, but it's also about people. It's about people who are always marginalized, who always have to find themselves negotiating for acceptance and negotiating for their space in society. So the theme for today's event, I'm not sure if all of us are aware, I'm not sure if you read your confirmation emails, but it says the home front, how families and religion shape attitudes towards LGBTI people in South Africa. I think this also reminds us about the importance of the home front, because for most LGBTI people, the family is a point or a place where we either gain or lose allies. Because before an activist can fight for your rights, before a teacher in your classroom can speak up for you as an LGBTI learner, or before a progressive reverend can actually embrace you, there's always a father or a mother or a relative who can either choose to respond with love or rejection. So the family is a very critical point which we should never take for granted. So, and like I said, we have this beautiful constitution, but we know experience has shown us that constitutions don't raise children, it is families. And that is why it's important for us to approach today's discussion with an open mind, because the laws may change, but changing people's hearts and minds requires a lot of work, which is constant, which is also, I think, not for the faint-hearted. I speak from experience as well. So I think as we engage today, I hope we approach this discussion with curiosity rather than certainty, and also with humility. But we also need to leave this room, even though we might not agree on everything, but I think it's important that we leave with a deeper understanding of one another and a deeper understanding of diversity. Because if we have that understanding, it becomes easier, or that creates an opportunity for us to create societies where everybody can be embraced, where LGBTI people can live freely without the fear of any violence or discrimination. So I won't waste time, but I just want to thank you so much for being here. I know a lot of you had to actually decide which one is more important, this event or your daily work routines. But thank you so much for being here, and I hope today's discussion will, I think, spark that conversation that we need to have in our dinner tables, in our pulpits, in our family rooms or wherever, but just to make sure that we teach and we also embrace diversity, whether it's towards your children or your neighbors or your congregants. I think overall what I'm trying to say is that welcome, and I think South Africa has shown us that despite us being an exception, but we always, I think, create hope for other people to see that it is possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Brian, for those words of opening remarks. Allow me then, colleagues, at this moment to call upon the director of the other foundation, Dr. Neville Gabriel, to give us some opening remarks as to why we're gathered here today.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I was asked to welcome you. This is not my home. But I do feel very at home here because of the great warmth and dignity with which the Seth Mokitime Seminary always hosts these events and welcomes our community here. I don't think you fully appreciate just what a powerful Christian witness your genuine searching with LGBTI people and their organizations is. To many hundreds of thousands of people, LGBTI people, who struggle to simply live an authentic life by reconciling who they are with their faith. Your genuine searching with our community is a powerful Christian witness. Or to families, parents, siblings, aunts and uncles, grandparents who love their LGBTI children and feel that they are doing something wrong by doing it because of their faith. which causes them oftentimes to reject their children, to harm them, to exclude them. Your searching together with our communities is a powerful Christian witness. Or to the LGBTI victims of ridicule and abuse and violence by those who believe they have God on their side. Your searching together with our communities is a powerful Christian witness which we do not take for granted. We are very proud of our association with you, the Seth Mokitimi Seminary, as the other foundation. Equally, we are very proud of our association with the KwaZulu-Natal Christian Council, Bishop Buthelezi, Douglas, Ziba, the extraordinary leadership that you give and your partnership equally powerful. The Ujamaa Center, Uthingo, the Uthingo network, who so excellently engages with such a broad cross-section of society in this province. It's extraordinary. We're very proud of our association with the Human Sciences Research Council, not only on this study, but what has it been for probably 12, 13 years, consistently tracking, and we actually don't have to ask them to do this. They constantly remind us that we need to update these studies. Very proud of those associations. So we don't stand on our own, we stand in solidarity and in partnership with all of you. So many church leaders from so many different districts in the province. It's extraordinary to see all of you gathered here today. I believe the research results that will be released here, we released it in Johannesburg 2 weeks ago and in Cape Town last week, with a slightly different angle. So what you're getting today is a fresh take on it. It's not just a repeat of what was done before. It's a fresh angle on this. I believe that the results will show that beyond laws and beyond the private interpersonal relations and interactions between people, it is really the social institutions that are the area that we need to focus on mostly. Our cultural traditions, our social practices, our religious traditions and practices. And that, in the end, comes down, as Brian said, to our experience of family and community. And so it is most appropriate that we gathered at this place today and not elsewhere, because we really want to genuinely, authentically, and seriously engage in the searching with you, particularly people of faith. And with those words, I welcome you.
Mystical, practical things. And unfortunately, my nervousness got the better of me. Just for our comfort, the bathrooms are the bottom passage, so down the stairs. On your left, there should be bathrooms downstairs. And also the smoking area, if you go out the stairs and out of the gate, basically it is behind this hall, but just on the other side of the parking lot. And so for any of the people who generally have that nicotine addiction, there is a space where we can congregate and burn our ashes together downstairs. And with those administrative and logistical aspects of it aside, allow me then to get to the crux of why we are gathered here today, which, as Brian has said, is to be looking at the home front, looking at how families and religious attitudes towards LGBTI people in South Africa. And so at this moment, allow me then to call Kayu and Ben Robertson to then give us a background of the research and presenting some of the selected findings.
Good morning everyone. I'm Caio. Thank you, Ciavulela, for calling me to the stage. Thank you again for opening your home to us. I always say every time I'm here, this place is very beautiful. It is really a place that invites reflection, and I'm very glad that all of you could be here with us this morning. Well, I'm here to share with you some of the findings of the research that you have been hearing about. I think many of you, I hope, most of people in this room, if not all, have a pamphlet with you that would have been delivered upon registration. So we're going to be talking very briefly about the contents of this pamphlet, which, as you can see when you open, is mostly numbers. Now, we understand that numbers are not necessarily the best way of communicating ideas, so we're not going to be spending the entire morning discussing numbers. We're rather going to think about what these numbers invite us to consider on broader social issues, issues of inclusion, issues of acceptance in South Africa today. Before I get into the numbers, I just wanted to make a quick comment. You can see here two covers juxtaposed. So today we are talking about findings of a research that the HSRC carried out between last year and this year. So most of data collection, most of the interviews that form basis of these findings were done throughout South Africa between November last year and February this year. So it's very, very recent information. Now, why did we do that? And why did we do that today? 10 years ago, part of the same partnership between the other foundation and the HSRC, we did a similar research called, you can see there on the back, called Progressive Prudes. That report is available on our website. Many of you may find the title, Progressive Prudes, a little bit peculiar. And the reason for that is that 10 years ago, what we found through this research is that in South Africa, most South Africans were supportive of the idea of equal rights, including equal rights and non-discrimination for LGBTI people, but at the same time, many South Africans also held somewhat conservative moral views. So, for example, thinking that homosexuality is wrong. Of course, that just because someone thinks that homosexuality is wrong, that doesn't mean they think LGBTI people must be treated unfairly. So that's what we found 10 years ago. We did the research again this year because, 10 years is an important landmark, and we wanted to find out what had changed. If the situation was the same, what had changed for the better, eventually, if things had changed for the worse as well, which is not something, change towards a positive outcome is not something that we should take for granted. Change happens through work, through advocacy, through mobilization at a community level. Many organizations here today have been doing this work, and some of the changes that we're going to speak about is, quite frankly, an outcome of the work that many here have been doing, including the KZN Christian Council, Seth Mokitimi Seminary, Uthingo Network, and PIFSAC, and others. So, in a way, the findings are a recognition and a celebration of this work. Now, let's go through the numbers, and I hope that this is going to be done very quickly so we can get into more interesting aspects of the discussion. So, there's some overall numbers in terms of opinions, right? General opinions that South Africans have on LGBTI issues. A good measure of general opinions towards LGBTI people is whether people consider homosexuality to be wrong. And we have seen in the last 10 years the number of South Africans that do think homosexuality is wrong dropped significantly. So, for example, 10 years ago, that was 66%. Today, it is for 52%. That is quite a significant change. Another good measure is whether people support same-sex marriage, right? If you support same-sex marriage, that means that you support LGBTI people's ability, for example, gay and lesbian people's abilities to form a family. And we saw that support for same-sex marriage has increased in the last 10 years to 45%. So we are talking about nearly half of the population. In addition to that, we also saw that around half of South Africans said that their views on LGBTI people had improved in the last 10 years. We found that to be very positive. People are aware of the changes that are going on in society. They are aware of the changes that are going on in their own mindset. And that is something very encouraging to see. In addition, and for the first time, and this is a reason for celebration, we see that the majority of South Africans, about 60%, so 6 in every 10 people, support equal rights for lesbians, gays, bisexual, transgender, and intersex people. The numbers for intersex people is particularly higher in comparison to the other groups. As you may know, intersex people are people who were born with a variation of sex characteristics, so they cannot easily be categorized as either male or female. Sometimes children are born like that, and it's very encouraging to see that there is a higher level of acceptance to this. Now, the findings are not all celebratory, even though I think we do have reason to celebrate. And the reason why we are here today with this framing, as Neville just mentioned, this particular meeting has a particular framing, which is about discussing inclusion within families and within faith. The reason for that is this that we are seeing here. Around half of South Africans, so half of the population of the country, they say they would accept a LGBTI family member. Now, when we think about that, when we think half of the people would accept an LGBTI family member, that may seem like very good, right? We're talking about half of the population as being inclusive. However, and this is the reason why we want to reflect on this, these numbers are roughly the same as what we saw 10 years ago. So the advance here was not as visible as the progress that we saw in other areas of public opinion, as we saw in the other findings of the survey. So perhaps something that we should be discussing today is perhaps why is that change here has been a little bit slow in comparison to changes in other areas of life, right? The same goes for culture and tradition. About half of South Africans said that they would accept an LGBTI person in their culture, in their tradition, which is again roughly the same numbers that we saw 10 years ago. So this is something for us to think about. Now, I just want to, the last thing I'm going to mention is this. which is a measure of allyship. So, for the first time this year, we thought that it was important to try to understand the levels of support that we could see in South African society in terms of behaviors, in terms of acts that people were perhaps willing to perform in public. By acts, I mean people who were willing to speak on behalf of an LGBTI person, people who were willing to defend an LGBTI person if they saw that person being discriminated, for example. And what we are seeing here is that around 17% of South Africans said that they had already defended a gay, lesbian, or bisexual person in public. That is really encouraging. And not only that, but a higher number, 27%, so 1 in 4, said that they hadn't done it, but they would do it in the future had they had the opportunity. So this is really important for us, and we know, particularly in this room, we thank you for being here. We know that many of you are working on a community level, are working on with the churches, where the very fact that you are here is a demonstration of allyship in our eyes. So I thank you for that. Now, speaking of allyship, I want to invite our colleagues from the HSRC to say a few words about this project, because allyship is not only happening in an interpersonal level between all of us here in this room, it also happens at the level of institutions that show support and solidarity for each other. The HSRC has been, sorry, I keep saying the acronym, let me say the Human Sciences Research Council, has been a very valuable ally of the Other Foundation, and by extension of the LGBTI movement in South Africa, by giving us this evidence, by giving us knowledge, so we are able to respond to the challenges that we are facing. I also want to mention that doing this type of work is a challenge to any research institution, because some of the issues being dealt with are sensitive. Some of the messages that one finds when doing this research, one needs to consider very carefully. In this particular case, the HSRC and Ben here, who I'm going to invite to the stage in a moment, have been working with a reference group made of activists, researchers, and members of different institutions. We have some of the members of the group here with us today. Some of them will join the panel, but I want to thank from now Santosh, Siabulela, and Brian, that have been part of this group and have been advising the Human Sciences Research Council and the Other Foundation throughout the process. So I'm going to invite Ben just to share with us a little bit.
Good morning, everyone. I think it's still morning.
Journey.
I think the Other Foundation really chose the venue appropriately to talk about union and about allyship. So we are very grateful for the foundation to bringing us together today, for the Seth Mokitimi Seminary, and also to the reference group, including Uthingo, Brian from Uthingo. So for us, this is a particular, as Neville said in his welcoming remarks, it's a particular journey, a research journey, but a research journey with a strong social purpose. I think if one looks at values in society, it's really trying to get at who we are as a nation, as a culture, fundamentally. I was part of the group that was involved in the research that we did in 2015. It was led at the time by Professor Vasu Reddy, who's now at the University of Free State. And what we wanted to do in 2015 with the foundation was really to look very carefully at prevailing approaches to public opinion research around LGBTI related persons and attitudes. And we were worried at the time because it was very framed from a kind of, we talked about decoloniality in the morning, very much from a kind of global north perspective. So the foundation with the reference group, and it was designed in 2015 with academics and activists as well, was to really do something that was different, to really get more nuance out of the results, that is something that was more appropriate to our context, to our society. That's where the themes, the narratives around family, around cultural acceptance came in. And that was something very unique for this kind of research. And the results, as we saw on the screen, the Progressive Prudes report of 2015 really spoke to the kind of findings that informed activism and advocacy could build around. And it has shaped thinking over the last decade and approaches to different forms of engagements with communities. It didn't stop there, and I think the foundation needs to be truly commended for its commitment to this kind of evidence-based advocacy and activism. After we did the surveying in 2015, it took that research to other southern African countries. So it's gone from Eswatini to Malawi to Mauritius, you name it. They really have expanded it, adopting the same approach, working with local scholars, LGBTI activists, and making that design of that survey instrument tailored to the needs and promoting the understanding of the societies in which it's embedded. As Neville also said, I tended to knock on the door a little bit after, it wasn't after 10 years, it was actually after 9 years I started knocking on that door saying, shouldn't we be thinking about looking again at South Africa and thinking about what might have changed in that decade. In doing so, the foundation brought together activists and scholars, not just from South Africa, but from the sub-region, from the other southern African countries that we had done surveying of this type in, and that was held about a year ago in June last year. That was to really to reflect deeply on what's worked, what hasn't, with the kind of approach we've adopted, and begin to think of what must be in the resurveying in South Africa. That was taken forward through the commitments made by the reference group, and we're very fortunate to have Siyabulela, to Brian, and Santosh here with us today to begin to particularly given their roles on the reference group and with this work, to reflect on the findings further. And that process has led to a deepening and an expansion of what we try to do. 10 years ago, the family, as Kyle said, is still firmly embedded in this research. We would have liked to see greater change coming through, and there is a point of probably ongoing dialogue we're going to have. Why did we not see an expansion of acceptance in the home space? So that is certainly one of the more intriguing findings to come out of this new round of surveying. So I think just as sort of final words is to just say the uniqueness not just of the kind of surveying that's being done and the purpose with which it's being done, but the process itself methodologically, this kind of process of bringing together LGBTI activists and scholars to inform the design, this kind of inclusive approach to designing survey tools is very rare, and it's critical innovation for that the foundation is committed to. And so I do wish to extend my gratitude to Neville, to Kyle and the team for really investing in this work, not just in South Africa, but in the sub-region. I think it's crucially important that we base programmatic work, engagements, dialogues like we're having today on proper evidence and the right kind of evidence. And the foundation has been really committed to making sure that happens. By extension, I would like to thank the reference group members that are present today and those who are not here, and look forward to the ongoing discussion of this work. So on behalf of the HSRC, we're very grateful to have been part of this ongoing journey and wish the Foundation well in its ongoing commitments to seeing the work promoted and discussed.
Thank you. Now, I'm just going to say two last things, I promise, especially that have to do with numbers. So one of the interesting findings that we saw this year is that about 39% of South Africans say they actually have a close friend or family member whom they know are LGBTI. Now, that actually shows a quite significant level of inclusion already. If people are saying, yes, I have a close friend, yes, I do have a family member who is LGBTI, and I know that, right? Now, further than that, this 40%, the people that have friends, that have a family member, are much more likely to have accepting views, and that is because they already have an LGBTI person in their close social circle. That is something for us to think about. That's something it's very important for us to think about what this means, right? Because it means that familiarity, exposure, experience in daily lives and in social environments, such as the dinner table, such as the community center, so on and so forth, they are all very important for the work of inclusion. Move again. Okay, sorry, this is the very, very last thing. So, we also ask people, okay, so you were telling us your opinions, but where do they come from, right? What are the bases of your opinions? Why do you think the way you do about these issues? The majority of people said that their opinions are coming from their families, things that they learned at home. That is almost 1 in every 4 person says that their opinions are based on what they learned at home. So let's think about that. Second most popular reason for opinions are community values. So what are people saying at the level of communities? And the third most popular reasons or influence of opinions was religion. So here we have the 3 aspects that are shaping opinions the most in South Africa: family, community, and religion. And this is why we are here today. And this is why the discussion today will precisely touch on these points. Now, you have the pamphlet. If any of you couldn't get it but would want it, please let us know after. The pamphlet has a code for you to access more detailed information. In terms of sharing results, I think we have more than enough to shape the discussion, which I'm very excited to hear. Now, I'm gonna call the panel, and please panelists come and join us here in front. So Santosh Pillai, please. Ronika Bagwenden, thank you. Virginia Magwaza. Tabiso Marilia. Thank you. Bishop Butelesi. And lastly, but not the least, our wonderful moderator, Pierre Buckley. Well,
Sambonani? Njani? Ngiyaphila. Yeah, it's so wonderful to be back in Ngungundlovu, the land of the elephant. So we're getting into the engagement part. We've heard our initial speakers actually speak a lot about engagement and discussion. And this is one of the critical parts of this gathering today. We're not here to be passive consumers. We're here to proactively contribute to the research that has been invested in. And so we're hoping that here in Maritzburg, we'll be sending a loud shout of our participation and how this research can inform our lived experiences from the communities, the places of faith, and our families that we come from. Before we begin, because we are in a place of faith, may I invite us all to pray. Let us pray. God of all, we give you thanks and praise that when we were still far off, you met us in your Son and brought us home. Dying and living, he declared your love, gave us grace, and opened the gate of glory. May we who share Christ's body live his risen life. We who drink his cup bring life to others. We whom the Spirit lights give light to the world. Keep us firm in the hope you have set before us, so we and all your children shall be free, and the whole earth live to praise your name, through Christ our Lord. Amen. Amen. Great. Does anybody need a stretch before we begin? And I hope you're sitting next to a stranger. So if you're not sitting next to a stranger, I invite you during the course of the discussion to move to sit next to a stranger. So as a way of introduction to our panel, good afternoon panel. Yes, and welcome. So just briefly, as a way of introducing yourself to the room, would you please just briefly say who you are, where you're coming from, and also your connection to the results of this research.
Sanibonani futhi. Igama lami nguVirginia wakamagwaza kodwa ngiyangithanda ukuthi ngibizwe ngesithakazelo sami uNjinji. Yengwayo uMabulbens. I come from an organization called Parents, Families and Friends of South African Queers. Eyaqala ngo-2013 isekhona namhlanje. I'm going to mix because ngisebenza nabazali ngiyazi ukuthi isilungu sithathe kahle. Hayi ngoba singasizwa kodwa yabo sithanda izinto ukuthi zingene ngolimi lwethu angithi. So umbuzo uthi sihlangana kanjani nalocwaningo? How do we connect with this research? Njengoba ngishilo ngathi ngibuye enhlanganweni uPIFSEC uDafushane. Ngihlangana ngokuthi njengoba besizule eqaleni ukhayo ekhuluma ukuthi ama numbers akhuphukile abantu abathi bayasamukela thina o LGBTI. Kodwa emakhaya kusashoda. Families are not as accepting as in other sectors of the society. So ngoba umsebenzi wami ukusebenza nabazali, nemindeni, nalaba abasupportayo sibabiza ngama-allies.
The organization that does the groundwork, and we try to capacitate families within the grounding space. So that's how we maybe connect to the staff.
Okay, I'll go. Hi everyone, I'm Santosh Pillay, born and bred in Pietermaritzburg, but I live in Durban currently, but my family still lives here in Northdale, so very connected to Pietermaritzburg. Born in Northdale Hospital. Turned out okay.
Are you sure?
And I used to be the chief psychologist for the KZN Department of Health in Durban, in the eThekwini region. I left the Department of Health about a month ago. I worked there for 15 years. I currently consult for the United Nations Development Program on another national project with some similarity to the project that's been reported on today, but the project is called the South African LGBTI Inclusion Index, looking at how society includes LGBTI people across different domains like healthcare, education, access to economic opportunities, etc. I also represent the Psychological Society of South Africa, which is a national organization of psychologists. And within SISA, we have a very progressive LGBTQIA plus stream. And so I'm part of a group of researchers there called the African LGBTQIA plus Human Rights Project. I know it's a mouthful. So I wear a couple of hats.
I'm here as a parent, a proud parent of a gay son. My association came through Brian, who helped me through my master's when I realized when my son opened up to me, and when he came out as being gay. The one thing that I decided to do was, because I couldn't be there for him during his struggles, I wanted to give other LGBT victims a voice. And I did that through my master's study. And through Brian's help, and I call you my gentle giant, through his help and guidance, I've managed to successfully complete my master's. I'm currently doing my PhD. So proud mama of a gay son. That's my first.
I'm a leader in the Zoe Christian Fellowship, but I belong to the organization called KwaZulu Natal Christian Council, and my connection with this research as an organization that is dealing with the faith community. We sat down and look how can we open up this discussion, which was very difficult to tackle within that space. The religious sphere is one of the very difficult one to hold this discussion. Some of the organizations and some of the churches have tried to tackle it. Some were divided, and some started to have these discussions, although they don't understand the whole topic. But what was good is that they started to talk about it amongst themselves. Because that's what we believe, that people start to be people when they talk about anything. Within the church, within the community. It is better for people to open up, because that is where we start to understand one another. And then acceptance then follows up after that. Because sometimes you agree that we are not the same, but we are people. So we can live together. Thank you very much.
Actually, or was your perception correct? Because of the way they dressed, I see some nods. Yes? So you knew immediately this is a religious leader? I wonder what gave it away. Did you know Santosh is a clinical psychologist?
No.
Yeah? Do we know Virginia was running this organization which is working with families? Yes, some did. Okay, good. So this is key about today's engagement. There's definitely, and I'm bringing you into the conversation. Our conversation is going to be in 3 parts. The very first part is having our panel here to engage with the findings that Ben and KO have presented. At least you've got a handout to refer to the stats. And the second part of that is going to be bringing you into the conversation, asking you for some feedback. So as our panelists are here speaking, I would like you to note those questions and those thoughts. And also you might be hearing something new that you haven't heard before for the first time, and you're becoming a bit more curious about human rights, inclusion and diversity, is it? So I heard Brian mention a reference to the Constitution. How many of you actively participated in drafting the South African Constitution?
No one in the room? Okay. Yeah? Anyone but you did? Okay, so we have two people participated in the drafting of the Constitution. So we can see how stakeholding is so important, and I think this is why it's vital. These conversations and engagements are bringing the research, the findings. Even though the group was relatively small compared to the population, it does give us a good insight of the reality that's taking shape. Did any of you connect yourself to the data that was shared with the results? Did it make sense to you? Yes? Good. Does the Constitution make sense to you? So we might be treading, and I want to tempt you to go there, because this is what I would say is called critical thinking. Is that sometimes we are fed information and we don't really critically think about it and how to contribute to ourselves. Often research is carried out and produced with little engagement. Some may argue that our Constitution is one such document. It's very clear. Very few of us participated in the drafting. But now that we have each had some level of engagement with the results of the South African Social Attitude Survey, as we begin to establish conversation around these findings, I would like for us to hold an end in mind. I'm sure that your time is important to you, so I wonder what was your aim of being here today for you. I'd like you to note that, whether you write it or you hold it in your mind. What is what you want to leave here with when you leave? So living and being part of a country with a richness in its fabric of diversity and its struggle with constitutional democracy, from our rugged past we emerge as a nation that has vast and valuable insights in how we navigate and transform the hearts and minds of people. And I wonder what connections for you were made as you review the results of the admission reserved report. Did anybody go through the whole report before attending? Well, it's fine. This is your first insight to it. So I'm curious to listen and to discuss and to understand, how do you here believe we can take this knowledge and use it to transform not only ourselves, but our families and our communities. Often here is what we refer to being our home. We saw this word home front. Who is at that home front? Who's at the home front? Sorry?
Parents.
Okay, parents. How many parents in the room? Yeah? Yeah, and the home front is really all of us. We are at the home front. And it's not our first time. So I think in this moment, while I was preparing to moderate the session, I thought about, we have faced challenges before. One of them might be the oppressive, separated regime of apartheid. One may be the discrimination and stigma that has been experienced by people living with HIV and AIDS. One may be not being ordained because you're a woman. And now we're sitting with this inclusion around gender identity, sexual orientation, or expression. So I'd like to bring our first really humble, I say humble, person who's just completed their master's. So Ronica, as a parent and ally, you did mention in your introduction a bit about that deeply personal connection to why you're seated here. And thank you very much for sharing that with us. What helps a family move from uncertainty, fear, or discomfort towards gender?
Firstly, thank you for having me here. I'm deeply honored. For me, as a parent and an ally, it wasn't a single moment where the acceptance was there. It was more a journey. Because you must remember, when a child comes out, many families are faced with confusion, shock, fear, and grief of their expectations, and also what society thinks. And what helps families move beyond these emotions is not denial or avoidance. It's accepting, it is education, it is supporting. And I've pen down some things, and forgive me for penning it down and not coming naturally. It's just that I didn't want anything to slip by the wayside. If I could, this is the one opportunity. So if we choose love before understanding, you know, as parents, we don't always have the answers. But if we choose love when our child comes out to us, we might not know everything. And when you take that decision to say, I may not know what you're going through right now, but what I know is that I love you unconditionally. And that's something that's important. Because love is the foundation to understanding. The second thing is educating yourselves. A lot of fear comes from misinformation, stereotypes, and beliefs that have not been challenged. Families, if they want to move towards acceptance, need to educate themselves. And this might involve reading reputable research, speaking to other LGBTI parents, and I know I did. And Nirupa, can you just wave? She was the first person that I reached out to when my child came out to me, and the support that I received from her was so immense, and the love just overflowed. And I want to say thank you. I'm so honored that you're here, to have met you here. It's also attending support groups and listening to the lived experiences of LGBT people. And with education, this would replace it replaces the myths with facts of the LGBT. Another thing is listening without judgment. You know, a lot of the LGBT, and also from my research, have gone through struggling silently with their identities. And when they finally open up to parents, I don't think it's fair that they need to be interrogated. They need to be heard. And if what it takes is listening more than speaking, creating a safe space for them to actually open up, and asking respectful questions, because listening allows for understanding, and the understanding of the emotional burdens that they carry. And you do not dismiss your children's experiences, because it's valid. The other thing is recognizing their struggle. Many parents focus on their own adjustment of how am I going to deal with this? And they unintentionally forget about what their child has gone through. Their child has navigated fear, isolation, rejection before coming out. And when family recognizes this, and when the shift occurs when they say, when they move away from saying, how does it affect me? But it's to what has my child been carrying alone? That empathy becomes a bridge to acceptance. And then challenging the social and cultural pressures. One of the greatest barriers is not of the child itself, but it's what we've learned as parents. It's what religion has taught us. It's what culture has taught us. And parents worry about religious condemnation, about family opinions, about community gossip, and the discrimination that the child might feel. But if you prioritize your child's well-being over all of that, you're winning. This is something, when I said to my son, you know, I've been invited to be on this panel, and this is something that was a very powerful realization for him and for me. It's the realization of knowing that this is the very same child that you've raised. It's the same child that you laughed with. It's the same child that you loved before they came out. So realizing that also helps you. It's just about knowing a deeper truth about them. And once we realize that, the acceptance becomes much easier. And then becoming an ally, acceptance becomes genuine when it moves from private feelings to supportive actions. And this can include defending an LGBT family member against homophobic discrimination, using respectful language, welcoming their partners as a normal heterosexual child would, as you would accept their partner. And correcting harmful stereotypes, and I'm so guilty of that, when somebody uses a derogatory word. I'm so quick to correct that. And my son says to me, Mom, you need to relax. Not everybody's on your level. And I always say to him, but how can you let that slide? And he's like, just relax, Mom. You can't change the world. So, yeah, but we can correct it. We can correct those stereotypes. So, and then also providing visible support. It's not about you just there, but it's just giving them that visible support and that love that they need. So acceptance is not tolerance. It is an affirmation that your child is worth dignity. I'm almost done, I promise.
I don't think anyone complaining.
This is the most important part for me, is understanding the power of parental support. I've seen this with my own child, and I've seen this with the participants in my study. And doing that study, for me, was a very personal journey, but also a very emotional journey. And although it was research and needed to be objective, the amount of participants that said to me, I would do anything for a hug. I would do anything to have my parents stand proud next to me. We need to understand that children have been chased, and when I say the word chased, shunned, and I say it with emphasis, out of their homes. They've been beaten. They've been forced into heterosexual relationships. The list is endless. And this is something that parents need to understand, is parental support is so important, because I've seen this with my child as well, is you have better mental health outcomes, you have a higher self-esteem, you have lower levels of depression, and lower suicidal rates amongst the LGBT. And parents need to understand that their acceptance becomes a protective shield for their child. And it was something that my colleague mentioned, having your parents on your side, you can stand tall. There was one participant who said to me, if only my parents were on my side, I would be able to challenge the world. And that hit home for me. It really did. And then I look at my son who's got the support. And then on the whole different opposite end, here's somebody that just wants that acceptance and that love. And a final reflection, you know, in my own journey with my child, acceptance didn't come because I suddenly understood everything, even through my study and whatever it was. It wasn't because I understood everything. It came because I realized that my son's greatest fear was not being gay. It was losing the love of the people he valued the most. And the moment I understood that question, the moment I understood that, the question was no longer, how do I feel about my child being gay? The question rather became, how can I make my child never doubt that he is loved? So in the final reflection, when families lead with love, they choose education over fear and place their child's well-being above social expectations. Uncertainty gradually transforms into an understanding, and understanding into acceptance, and acceptance into pride. And that is what
I was that generous, not because you were first, but because it's quite rare to see parents stepping up on platforms like this and sharing, you know, those insights with us. I think this is where I want to bring in Virginia, who does a lot of work with parents, families, and groups around them, allies, groups around you. Because in South Africa, I mean, I'm one of them. I was orphaned as a child, so I'm sure there's many of us in this room who didn't have two parents growing up, and maybe now you don't have two parents. Perhaps your grandparents raised you. So there's also an importance of looking at what is the context, how does it fit into the reality of the context. And I appreciate what you brought in, particularly that insight at the end about what you realized, the value, where the values lie. I often say we can learn, and I wish we had children here, we can often learn way more from the little adults in the room than from the big adults. Because when we were younger, we hardly saw these things as things. We just went out and played and greeted one another. So Virginia, in your work with parents, families and allies, where do you think families most often struggle? We've heard some of them from Veronica. But in your own experience, where do you think the struggle is with sexuality, gender identity, and maybe even with, we're going to tread a bit on your front. Thank you. Maybe also with community judgment.
Thank you very much, Peter. So parents struggle with quite a number of things. On sexuality, there will be always lie. So if you are a lesbian, where am I going to get grandchildren, right? And if you are assigned female at birth and you transition from your gender that you assigned at birth. Now I was born as Virginia and I decided that I am going to transition into being Victor. Parents always struggle to the fact that they don't know how to relate now with a new person, right? And religion is always a problem because we all know parents, we want to go to heaven, right? But we cannot be assured of heaven if we go to church and the pastor is saying the child that is in your home is a demon, right? And that's what leads to many parents decide to disown their children. And I think my fellow parent here has pointed out that the fear that we get when our children come out to us, we fear to lose heaven. Sometimes we also fear to lose our marriages or our families. And because sometimes a mother can accept the child, and the father is saying, this is your thing, this is your family thing. In my family, we don't have these things because this is how we are referred to, right? And also that results to a number of social problems. One of them is gender-based violence, because now there's misunderstanding between the mother and the father. So parents also don't want to lose their positions in church. They also don't want to lose their status in the community, because gay people are not seen in most instances. Sibonakala njengabantu abangebona abantu. Esikhathini esiningi sibonakala sengathi sihlulekile emhlabeni. Yet, look at us. We are wonderful people. We are great people. We do things the same way as we do things. I just want to also talk about the connection of rejection by the families with religion. Because pastors are powerful. Pastors are believed to say things that are supernatural. So if, as a pastor, you stand on the pulpit and say LGBTIQ plus people are demons or are worse than animals, know that you have actually embarked on a process of dismantling the family, not only the family, but also the world. And there are contradictions also in that, because as churches, we always come together, we pray for all the things that are affecting the society, suicide, as we spoke about it, substance abuse, gender-based violence. But think about a parent who listened to your sermon and went back home and disowned their child, and the child goes to the world and they do all those things. That is a contradiction. Because we are saying, we're praying to God, stop this, but indirectly we are promoting or we are contributing towards those things to happen. So it is important for us to understand that families should not feel that their child is no longer a human being. I think Mama said clearly here that when your child come out to you, it does not mean that they are no longer your child. Esikhathini esiningi singabazali sisakumphakathi, we are scared of what the next person or the neighbor is going to say. Because when we bring our child on this earth, we have expectations. We build our lives through our children. Now all of a sudden you see a young boy who has a wife, who brings grandchildren, and the minute they are not what you are expecting, you then decide that they are not worth living. It clearly shows them that the change in the society, in the thinking and in the attitudes of people sits with families. And as I stated earlier, that we need to make sure that as families, we take this serious, because we cannot have a study that says families are actually stifling progress. Because we clearly see that in South Africa there is progress, but something is making.
So to bring in Becky Temba, who I've met several times before this, so a good shining beak of hope and light, which is like Virginia says, places of worship and faith are places of hope and light. And so I'm hoping to bring a lightness to the conversation. And I'd like to hear from Becky Temba, what is it that the church is doing? We know of all the wrongs in the church. We know of the clever texts that are used. We hear all these things, and I love what you said also, that pastors have a power. Also, where does that power lie? Where's it actually coming from? People sometimes hear the thing of the powers in the collar, and maybe if Becky Temba didn't wear his collar, we would have a very different interaction with him, or engagement with him. You should do it one day. Yeah. And see how, yes. So my question to you is, just listening to both the previous two panelists, understanding the difficulties that families are going through. And churches are often seen as a place of refuge,
and to bring people together, to unite them, just like Virginia was saying, and to treat people with dignity and equality. How are churches currently moving in this conversation beyond a perceived conflict and between the doctrines to equal rights for all? Noting again, we have this wonderful document, the Constitution, which says we are all inherently born
down there. Glad to see here. Let me just begin by saying that as we started this conversation within the religious spaces, we believe that we cannot change everyone in one day. We believe that it's a journey that we need to travel together with those who understand and with those who don't understand this topic. I think that is very important for us. And then another very important thing is that the church, as we are talking about the home front, the church is another home where the pastor, the mama mfundisi, we take them as parents. What becomes very important in this home is unconditional acceptance. There is no one that when he comes to church, the pastor will stand at the door and ask, what is your sexual orientation? There is no church that I've seen that is doing that. So the church is a home for everyone. Is a home for the parent, is the home for the LGBTQI person. Because the church accepts even the worst sinner, if we may use that example. We accept that. We've got people that are struggling with some addictions, but we have never stood at the door and say, you are not accepted here. Because we believe that the church is a home that must be open for everyone to come in and have a relationship with God. So, for LGBTQ people and families, the church is where their identity, where they get care, they get moral guidance, and also is where they belong, where we all belong. That is the church. So the main thing that I think we're struggling with is the issue of the doctrine and the issue of equal rights. But my input on that is that we as the people of faith, we know that dignity, justice, and hospitality are also core doctrines. So, if we talk about doctrine and the rights, we must know that the doctrine itself, it includes the dignity, the justice, the hospitality, as part of what we preach.
I appreciate the dignity in which you're doing the movements. So I want us to pause here because I do see some people reflecting on this. It's quite interesting to hear our bishop here speak about what's going on, what churches are doing. Nobody should ask you what your sexual orientation is at the door. I'm wondering if those experiences that you are having in your place of faith. And so when we open up the dialogue to hear, are these experiences similar, what's happening? There's also a good challenge that you pose to the room. What are we going to do about the contradictions within these things around hospitality versus rejection, or
Yes, so what are we going to do about that? So we'll open up that dialogue. I'd like to come to you with Trans Hope, Teresa. So I understand you're working at the cold face of what many trans people specifically, but also LGBTI people face. You're in Umlazi. I can imagine this is a really under-resourced community. Could you share with us what are some of the real lived experiences of trans individuals, of queer individuals that you've come into encounter with? And do they have, facing in these three areas around family, community?
What the Honorable Pastor is shared is that it differs similar to our Constitution. Our Constitution is very beautiful. It says we are all one, we are equal in the eye of everyone. But at the end of the day, it's not true when you go to the ground. You go to the ground, you'll find that a space where I, as Tabis or a normal person that growing up from Umlazi, supposed to be finding shelter, supposed to be finding a home as we are painting the church as a whole. I, as a queer person, cannot find that home at the church. And as much as there's no guards at the door that says we as queer people shouldn't be entering, but if I walk in that door wearing a dress with this beard, with this with this look, but honestly, with this look, you'll always be judged. There will always be those verses that are used just to make sure that you feel uncomfortable. I'm not going to sit here and say they are used intentionally, but if we were all to define the very one scripture that we have in the Bible, it's defined in different ways, in different feelings as well. The Honorable Brian, as I always say, the Honorable Brian from Uthingo made an example of the pulpit, saying who has power is the pulpit or the person behind the pulpit. So even how religion is narrated or the narration behind the religion always comes from the person behind the pulpit. How is that person feeling? Because in this church they can accept me as a queer person, and then in the next church they will not accept me as a queer person. And then it goes to our parents. Our parents will know each and every queer person that there is on TV, and they'll be loving those characters. If it's a series or whatever, or on radio, they'll be loving our queer sisters, our queer brothers on radio. But at the end of the day, you need to come and say, when you are that very same person that you have been seeing on TV is now here at home. It's your child, your son, your daughter. But what does then happen? Well, what happens is that person no longer has a home. But the very same stranger that you watch on TV, that TV is in your house. You are accepting that person in your home, but you cannot accept your own child at your own house. Going to our communities. Our communities are very beautiful. In Umlazi, I've never seen a person that's if I would say for the community of Umlazi, if I would say the community of Umlazi is against LGBTQI people, or a community in Mali Spring is against the queer community, I would be lying if I said here and said that. But it's how things are narrated, or how certain people in certain positions push a certain narrative that will always come to those within the community level. And then when information comes to the community level, nobody's there to control how one person reacts to it. Because we have queer people that are growing up from Umlazi, but have never a single day faced an attack of the next person or a neighbor or whatsoever. But every time when they're in the spaces whereby there's certain narration that is being brought into that space, then it becomes a problem. For instance, I'll go to functions. Those traditional black traditional functions. You be in those spaces, and then they will say, as a queer person, they will say, all the men will sit here, and then all the women will sit there. What about me, as a queer person, who's non-binary? Where do I then fit? That means I'm not going to get a place in that house, because it's not the family that says that. No, it's the rules, the traditional norms that are there, that are put there for me to to bind me to say, okay, then that means if I need to have peace in this space, I need to fall. It's either I fall on men, or it's either I fall into women. That's where now it becomes a problem. Coming to me as a youngster as well, unmarried, that still becomes a problem even in those factors as well. Say, as a young person who's unmarried, that means I cannot go and sit with those men because I'm not seen as a man. So for me, it's not necessarily about us as a general community or the general community at large, but it's about the narration of those words or those guys that can shape or relate to our communities.
Between family, community, religion, yes? Santosh, sitting there patiently, being a good psychologist, listening to everything that is happening. What is your diagnosis? No, I'm kidding. So Santosh, for you, before we break into the opening conversation, but definitely yes, you've been listening to what each person has to say. What is in your view, what do you believe families, parents, allies, churches, spaces of community, friendship, whatever it is, what is it that they can do better to include LGBTI people within their practice? So we've heard these different culture.
But thank you, Pierre, and greetings to the panelists, also Bishop, Honorable Voice, and other dignitaries. As we say in government, all protocols observed. I mean, I think if we think about it at a broader level, we can also trouble the notion of family and home and community, because these are not separate institutions. And I like the way the bishop spoke about the church as being a home as well. You know, and we know as queer people, the concept of home has always been flexible. The concept of family has also been flexible, because while there's biological family, there's chosen family. And so, you know, I think as queer people, when we think about family and home, it's not the family and home that maybe heterosexual and cisgender people think about. It might not be the parents that raised you, if you had parents, or even the grandparents that raised you. It might not be that brick and mortar house that you grew up in, that's your home. Home might be other places. For some people, their workplaces might be more of a home space than the home they go to at the end of the day. You know, so we've got to think, I think, differently about what do we mean when we say home. You know, when we say family, who are people actually referring to when they talk about their family? Because for most queer people, it's not the biological family. The ovary and sperm donors are not the family. You know, they might just be the people that are doing the necessary. So I think that's the first thing, is let's think differently about home and family. I think the other interesting data point around, I think it's roughly 50% of family members said they will accept someone if they were LGBTQIA+. I think the number's higher. Because I think when people answer a question on a survey, it's hypothetical. If I don't already have a gay or trans son or daughter, I might think that I will not accept them if they come out. But when it actually happens, I think, like panelists said, love kicks in. And I can think of many countless examples of people I know, patients I've worked with, where the idea of a gay or trans or bisexual son or daughter is something they can't wrap their head around. And so they might say in a survey, no, I can't accept them. But when you are the actual person in reality, faced with your son or your daughter, things are different. You know, and I think for most people, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. I think they would find the love inside of them, to find that empathy and find that understanding to accept their child. So I have a little bit more maybe of an optimistic view on it. That I think when put in the right situation, most people, I think, would find love, understanding, and empathy. But at the same time, I think we have to also understand that it's also a journey for those people. So families, religious institutions, friends, neighbors, etc., I think they're also going on a journey as well. And I think even as queer people, when we come out, we want immediate acceptance. Because we come out when we are ready. But if you think of how long it takes someone to come out, it's unreasonable to expect that the moment we are ready to come out, that all spaces around us must also get ready. And so there needs to be some sort of balance, I think, in that, in the same way that queer people journey to acceptance, it might be that when people receive the news for the first time, they also need to journey to acceptance. I think the trouble happens when people are then kicked out, discriminated against, attacked, etc. So we need to find ways where we can create space for acceptance while giving both parties, I think, time and energy to find each other, which I think is not easy. Because what does, for example, a gay or a trans person do while their families are waiting or while their families are journeying towards acceptance? You know, they are still caught in that kind of limbo. So I think there's lots to like think about and chew on. But I think perhaps we need empathy on both sides. You know, yeah, not just for the queer people, but also for the institutions that have to also make sense of this.
Coming out of our panelists' minds. Quite often, I think 4 out of 5 sitting here use that word. It's a journey. There's a journey of discovery. I think none of us, when we were born, knew exactly who we're going to become, what we're going to be like. We sort of discovered that as we're going. So I'm going to invite you. This is now your turn. You were using your listening ears, and I know you've been waiting to just bolt out of the gates like the horses from the July a few weeks ago. So this is your time, and so the conversation is open. I would like to hear, I know the gentleman there, you would go first because you had a point earlier, if it's still relevant. I would ask you please to be really succinct and brief in your point. And when I say that, think of and sorry, sir, can I encourage you? Just say your name and tell us what you think.
Oh, I am Oscar Nyat.
Thank you.
My question is about family. When parent was addressing, I just want to ask, at what age do you observe these differences? And then I heard about religion.
Sorry, I messed up here. Just one, is this a separate question? If it is a separate question, I'm going to ask you to please hold it. One question at a time. One question per person? Good. Is it a separate question or linked to your first one?
Yeah. Let me run it and sit down.
Sorry? That's the same question. Okay, run it.
I heard about religion because I understand that the church is the place of love. If there is a rejection of the LGBTQIA, I don't understand because in the church they should avail themselves. Maybe they are not because I understand that the leadership in the church are people who are trained and empowered with skills of leadership and to accept everyone the same. I don't understand where
Bishop is coming
such...
Yeah, I can see there's so many churches, not so many churches doing this part of work. What ways did you use to start, dealing in the LGBTQ plus issues? Because in the church, there's a lot of moral injuries in the church. So how did you do it so that other churches also can come on, that they can also open their doors? Because many churches are not doing that. And maybe just a comment, the language, I think for each one of us, the language we use, it's very damaging Because if only we can learn in whatever you are doing, also the language. Because most of the times when people are saying it's them and us, remember that is my child. You know, it doesn't matter of the sexual orientation, but as a mother, I need to create a safe space for that child. In the work we do, I create that safe space for that child, because if I'm not creating the safe space, they're not going to come to me, because already in the world they are judging. We are being judged. So as a parent, wherever we are, let's create a safe space.
I was a little bit offsided by how you wanted it done. Firstly, I had the bishop speaking on the church. So the reason that I said my church is that my question will depart from that. How is the church educating itself on the understanding of inclusion? I am saying this because my understanding is that inclusion is not pronounced but lived in the same way that Transhope has explained. In my own church, we accept queer persons in all respect, and we even have platforms for them. But I am a member of the Young Women's Mañano in my church. When I go to the uniform of my church, it says that the uniform is a skirt with a bow split and a blouse with 4 buttons. The 5th one is on the belt. That's my church. The same church that accepts everybody, and I've seen it. But we also further go to find that when speaking about the role of the ministers, it includes a wife to a minister and a husband to a minister. Now, that to me says that there might not necessarily be that acceptance, particularly if you've read the article by one professor, which is on the biblical perspectives of homosexuality in the Xhosa culture. So that all together, especially when you read the book of Leviticus 18 and 20, scripturally, how then is the church aiming to use inclusion, not as a pronunciation,
around curiosity
but as
of
a
asking when an individual discovers that, or we're saying discover loosely, that they are an LGBTIQ person, that they are LGBTIQ or part of that community. There's an interest around what age is that. There's some sort of curiosity there. But the second one, which I've heard from all three, is really asking what is happening to the training of religious leaders? Because there's a lot of power that sits there. What is happening to our theological institutions? What is the theological training and learning and underpinning? And there's even a reference to one of the texts that's often used as a clobber text. And the link is on Mujama's website. Good, so there's a lovely toolkit there. But I'm going to ask, because I think one is really for you, if you can also just be succinct. These are lovely, actionable, and this is the third phase of our discussion today, is to leave here with practical tools. How does this survey that the Human Science Research Council, together with the other foundations, and their backing of donors, that might be a question for a prize, if you know who's behind the backing of funding this research. But there's investment in this, and how do we use the research to inform the changes we want to see?
I think for a long time, institutions where pastors are trained were not bold enough to give the right interpretation of the scriptures. Because even there, when they go to the colleges or institutions or Bible colleges, they get that training at different levels. Some they've never been at the Bible college. The Spirit of God just spoke to him, and then he woke up in the morning and he pronounced that he is a bishop, or he is called and then he opens a church. I think that is the first one, and then the second one is where you get that certificate, 1 year, 2 year certificate. You go, you open the church, and claim that I know everything. I think the emphasis from the churches has not been strong enough. When I was called, when I felt the call of God upon my life, when I approached the leadership, and they took me through the process of the church, and then it was emphasized that we cannot ordain you unless you go to the institution and get trained. And when you come back, you are taken through another process of probation, where you do the practical ministry. They observe you, whether you have absorbed what you are studying, and then they help you close the gaps.
I'm going to interrupt you. So the question is really about, we understand that people who are called to ordination, who get the calling, have some form of education. The question is, what in that education is being done around pastoral care and sensitivity, particularly for LGBTIQ+ individuals? That's what you're saying. So is there anything, to your knowledge, and denominations are different, so I'm glad somebody mentioned, maybe in certain denominations, and this is open to you as well, maybe in your denomination, there is specific trainings that are specifically designed to train your religious leaders around being sensitive of people of diverse sexualities or gender expressions.
To be honest, that has never been included for the longest of time. Most of the pastors that went to the institutions to be trained, that topic, even myself, I don't remember. I was exposed after, when I met the reality on the ground. Then I was starting to ask myself, is there anything wrong with me? Is there anything wrong with my faith? Then I started to be curious to learn more and explore what is really in when we talk about care.
Like you expressed in your opening statement, there are churches that are affirming, welcoming to people. And Brian mentioned, we're here to change really the hearts and minds of people, which really takes time and investment to get that sense
to appreciate the environment. Because as South Africans, we must appreciate this environment. Some other countries, it's a sin to even have this platform. Some other countries, it's even a crime to have this platform. So we have a milestone. So I take it from there. And thank you to our psychologists who have mentioned a very mouthful that the process has to consider both sides. If it took me 4 years to come out, I should expect that it can take someone else another 4 years to come out. Like when I went to a gym, they asked me, how long did you have this stomach? I said, I had it for 4 years. And then they said, how long do you want it out? I said, tomorrow. They said, no, it will take you another 4 years. So I think it's the same thing. But more on the same issue. I think we are here as part of the structure of KwaZulu-Natal Christian Council, which is part of the formation of the book that was researched and published as part of the church's contributions towards the issue we are here about. And it is correct that we can't speak individually as my church or whose church, but we can rather speak strongly under the umbrella that guides us all as KwaZulu-Natal Christian Council, which has the formation that deals with social issues such as these issues, and which is also partnering with the center that you have been mentioning, Ujama and Fokisa and other formations that help assist in training pastors, even if they were trained in their theological formations, but they also need to be capacitated. These are the discussions that were presented to us that informs that these researches were done 10 years ago. And 10 years ago is not very far. So we are all in a journey, as we were discussing with the panelists. We are all in the journey. But I want to comment also with the
which is KZNC and the relationship that we have with UKZN and Ujama. It helped us then to rise to that level where we started to explore these topics with that smaller group that started to challenge your thinking and your theology. Then you start to go deeper and one more on your theological development. So it starts with one person sometimes, because sometimes we cannot start with the diocese. To say, I want to change the whole diocese to understand this issue. Start with few that might understand. It could be the bishops, the influential people in that
Africa. So I hear you. So there's a strategy working with heads of churches. It trickles down. What will it take? This is maybe something to think about, not to answer. What will it take our faith communities, just from the get-go, when I say, I wake up today, I have a calling on my heart, I want to become ordained, that it forms part of your training, that it's not the separate, it's somewhere out there, it's elective, it's like, yes. So something not to really just think about. Just want to check with our time. What time, how much time do we have?
I mean, we started late.
Yeah, we did.
So
I was going to run the conversation till 1:30. Is everybody happy with that? Good. So we've got
some of these trainings, some independent church training qualities, some they exclude these topics. But as a formation, we have find this way where we deal with these issues with all of them. Then they are able to go back and open up with their leadership to talk about this. But also those who are able to go to further their studies, they are included. Found here in UKZN, you find them when you continue with your studies at the UKZN. But the level where I was talking, at Bible colleges, most of them, they are controlled by the denomination. But at the university level, they cover everybody. That's why everybody can be trained there.
Although we're talking about the training of people in the church context, if we think of training in general, we're going to think about how we teach people to deal with diversity. Because this is just one example of diversity. How do we deal with foreign nationals? How do we deal with people with mental illnesses? How do we deal with people with physical disabilities? How do we deal with people who are LGBTQIA+? How do we deal with anyone who is different, diverse, does not fall part of the bell curve in the middle? So we always, I think, have this idea that people are the same. And I think part of any training, whether it's in the church, whether it's to become a psychologist, whether it's to become a pastor, anything, has to deal with diversity. And so I don't think we should also overly exceptionalize LGBTQIA+ populations. Like there's this ultra special group out there that needs this intensive training and dialogue and community gatherings on a Wednesday. We need to think about how we deal with diversity, because South Africa talks about unity and diversity. And so wherever we train, in whatever profession we are, we need to think about diversity. And what does it mean to be a country that lives and breathes diversity?
Completely. So from today on, I challenge you, and that is part of diversity. It's to say, it's so interesting, we need to have these special things to talk about how we treat somebody else. Just in our isiZulu greeting, Sawubona, we're saying, I see you. And even in Ubuntu, right? I am because you are. So therefore, if you are not, I'm not. The moment you ignore the next person, you're saying, I also don't exist.
Acceptance. Because acceptance is not just to say, I accept you. It has to be accompanied by the process and the work that will make me feel assured that you are accepted. Currently, we have a debate from Cape Town where there's a debate about not flying the LGBTI flag, but the school claims that it is accepting of LGBTIQ plus people, but they don't want the symbol that represents LGBTI people to be seen. So there's also hypocrisy there where you are saying you are accepting, but you don't want to show that you are accepting, right? So I think it's important that we understand that we cannot just talk about accepting just as to tick a box. It has to be accompanied by the policies, the practices. As this was saying about the uniform, does the uniform shows that the Methodist is accepting? And can Tabiso come with the uniform that is
from here in Maritzburg, and again, I'd like to open up with a huge shout out to the panel. I think I would like to just add into the conversation of diversity and how we include that. I think I want to mention two things. In my journey, because we're speaking a lot about a journey, there has been a few elements that I've picked up, and one of the main challenges is that we as a society have been stuck in the whole context of labels. And I think that's something that sets us back as a community and as a society from moving forward. Because every single new year, every new generation comes with new labels. And I think when we're speaking about inclusion, when we're speaking about diversity, the utopic society that we want to end up in is one that doesn't have labels. And I think where I'm going to, you don't need a lot of context to understand the dangers and toxicity of patriarchy and of colonialism, culture, and the nuclear family structure, right? And I think what I would like to impart into the general conversation we're having today is that it really all starts with you as an individual. There is an amazing question that you asked, looking around, is there anybody that you see that identifies as you? That is a call to action to us, because a lot of the questions that we have end up adding a lot more pressure to bishops, to pastors, to psychologists, to academics. But I think in closing, the greater conversation never leaves Google. It never leaves the internet space. It never leaves these boardrooms, because we ourselves as individuals don't take it to our families. So that's a call to action to us as individuals who are different, to not wait for a series to play on TV to start a conversation with your family. To understand that we are in a time where we have grown, we are now educated, we're no longer stuck in the past of apartheid. And to know that because you're educated intellectually to know better, individually start doing better. Because the issues are in communities, rural communities, who don't have access to these spaces, who don't have access to these institutions. And those are the individuals who struggle a lot, whether it is with sexuality, or with spirituality, or with culture or religion. And I think that is a call to action again, and I'm closing off now, that I think I want us all to leave this conversation with, is to not wait for academics to publish research articles, to not wait for ministers and pastors to preach on a Sunday, but for you who is a parent, for you who is an aunt, who is an uncle, who identifies differently, sit down and you have young children in your family, engage those conversations so that young child grows up in a situation and environment that's better for that child to live in a future that is more inclusive. And I think that's a call to action to us, whether you have a label, whether you have a status or not. It is something that we can do differently, that when we get home today, you say to your family who wasn't here today, to that old mama, to that old mkulu, that I was a part of a conversation today with people from different walks of life, with different struggles and different challenges. This is my takeaway. And so with that, let us do something different in this family. Asiqale ngomndeni wethu ukuthi lekhaya sizohloniphana. In this family, we will see each other beyond labels. In this family, we will allow our children to grow, not confined into becoming an identity. Closing, really, I'm serious. I think as a generation, because we have been able to move past being taught that we can only become doctors, teachers, and nurses. Now we can stand as graduates of architects and different plethora of entities. We can understand that we need to move that journey and progress it forward. And it all starts with you who knows your difference, speak your difference, but start at home and make sure that the young kids in your family grow.
I'm very familiar with the other foundation, Virginia, Peer. But most importantly, today my heart is very touched because I met Ronica. And Ronica is a lady that reached out to me 8 years ago with her son. And 9 years ago, I lost my son. So I have something to say to parents because I am a parent who doesn't have my child anymore. So please, I say this every time, it begins with love. Nothing else, just love. Because when you love, acceptance will follow. So thank you very much.
Don't worry, the other denominations are cool too. I just wanted to, what stood out for me from the panel's conversation, and big up to the panel from Virginia, your work is awesome, is the interaction between two very important institutions or societal institutions that even though they do not directly speak to gender and bodies, they are gendered and bodied spaces, right? And so family and religion, and how religion holds almost a repository for the imaginary world that allows family to be what family is. It is the world-making machinery for family and for identity. I think for me in the study, and this is a comment, not a question, is there's an anxiety for me because family values has become a very contested space. And family values and the religious right kind of speaking into the formation of or the imaginaries around what makes family, right? These two spaces are interacting in social areas, in our politics, right? But also in the ways in which we understand what it means to be an African, right? Or what it means to be South African. So even nationalist identities seem to be incubated in these two containers. And for me, the study illustrates the importance of when these two containers begin to interact in ways it can actually bring change. And for me, it's just a comment, like, how are we going to engage with the contested space of family values in Africa, particularly, considering that in next year, we are going to be hosting a family values conference that is being particularly held within the evangelical container of the religious imaginary, right? And what does it mean for us? How do we speak to this anxiety?
Yes. Firstly, thank you. Thank you for the panel and for the discussions. Rewinding my life and my whatever, I've never been to a discussion of this nature. Yet, as an Anglican priest, the Anglican has been wrestling or discussing with these things for the last 16 years already. And personally, I have spoken to a person who is a lesbian and a gay and a bisexual. But I have not spoken to a person who is a transgender or intersex or this other Q, to which I cannot. I don't know whether here there is a person, I ask this in all humility, who can allow me to speak to him or her. Because sometimes we as a church, the bishop has said it, we are the home. I want to add, we are the hospital. and the hospital accept any type of a person who is, any type of person who is sick. Therefore, sometimes we resist as a church because of lack of knowledge. I personally was not aware until I spoke to a lesbian and a gay and a bisexual. Then I began to understand what that is. Is there a person who can give me that chance? Thank you.
We didn't get your name in the beginning.
Oh, my name, Gogo. Why?
Sensitive in both ways, right? So I know that maybe somebody says things and you go, oh, you know, that makes you uncomfortable. But be gentle, because everybody's on a journey. So just like the Reverend didn't mean harm, but sometimes people we will face. Very often I get it. I get called Mlungu. Very often. And I'm not. But I can't change the color of my skin. And so I might find it offensive, but I must understand where the other person is coming from. So having that understanding, and this is how we heal and how we mend relationships. So I'm hoping, Reverend, that somebody in the room will be brave enough and courageous enough to speak to you after the discussion has ended. Thank you. So very quickly, because we are running and I'm quite time bound, is very quickly, if you have, I know you already have, we'll start with you. If you can do it in a minute, I really ask you to do that, and then I will round us off just with general observations from the discussion.
Right, 18 when he came out. He was 18 years old when he came out to me, which is about 10 years ago. And through that, it's been a journey and I'm still learning. So the word journey has been used a lot today, like you said, it is a journey. I also want to touch on, you know, with my study, the results found that religion and culture informed parents' acceptance or denial of their child. And more often than not, the verse, the Leviticus verse was quoted, and you know, most of my participants didn't want to come out based on what the sermon is at church, based on what their parents know, based on what culture has taught them. And they feel I'd rather be independent before I actually come out to my parents. I'd rather live on my own and have my own independence before being kicked out of the house. So in having said that, I think parents should not use their authority as a weapon.
Thank you.
I agree with you that this is a journey, but also in the midst of the journey, we need to also have a point of learning. Because the Mangete said something and we were like, but probably he does not know why.
Reverend, this is for you.
Mangete, uma uti esontweni isibhedlela. Manje kuzwakale ngathina ukuthi ngoba isibhedlela thina ama-LGBTI mele siyothola ukulashwa. Ngicela singaphikisani, ngikutshelela ukuthi u-understand ukuthi kungani kuye kwaba khona i-reaction. Ngoba vele inkulumo ebakhona ukuthi thina ama-LGBTI siletha nezifo nalento yokuthi makukhulunywa nge-AIDS ihlanganiswa nathi. So yingakho-ke siye sathi ukunyakaza kancane ngoba asizithathi njengabantu abagulayo, sizithatha njengabantu abafana nabanye abantu. Asidingi ukulashwa ukuthi ngoba siyiyona, kodwa siyathanda ukuthi sibe sesondweni nathi njengawo.
Who here is perfect? No one. It's hard to forgive, right? Yeah, and so also, so understanding again, putting ourselves in the shoes of someone else, it's having that compassion to understand we do make mistakes, and when you make a mistake, we acknowledge it, we learn from it, we do better. I love what you said. When we know better, let's do better. Now that we know better,
so
let's
now approach the institutions of higher learning, the cluster of higher learning, so that we introduce this idea of introducing these topics on diversity, how they deal with it, so that it's not only the university that introduces that, but a person can start at a lower level and then when they grow. So there is a buy-in. We are happy about that. And then my last word will say, loving is a choice and a decision. So when we go out here, let us take a decision. I'll love even if sometimes I don't understand. I love my children even if I don't understand how they behave. But it does not change them that they are my children. So I decide to love them.
Okay, nobody's Christian in the room. Okay, then never mind, then it's irrelevant. I hear Seko now. So those who are here, you're saying Seko. So you're here. What are the first two commandments of being a Christian?
Love your neighbor as yourself, and love God above all.
Excellent. I hope the other foundation has a prize for you, yes? so with those, love, and that's what I say, I get a great sadness when I'm in church every Sunday as we do penitence, because we ask for penitence. And actually, in asking for penitence, we are saying we are going to go out not to repeat these things. And you say these words, love God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. And it's a sadness because when I see how you treat me, I think how sad it is. How do you actually love yourself if you treat me like this?
For the opportunity to
So I love that point.
in the bishops sitting in this beautiful panel. But what I would like to take out, I've been taking home from today is that there's room for learning. And what I wish that the bishop or the religious sector will take home is that include us when we are drawing up the trainings that you attend to. Include us so that we can also see the language that is being used in those places as well. Because at any university, there's books that are written by certain individuals. What is the language that is there? So that we can see if we are implementing what we are being taught or if we are not implementing that. So that we know how and who to hold accountable, how to hold you accountable as a religious sect. And also, what I would like to take away, and also what I wish to give away to the parents that are within the room, and to the young community, to the LGBTQIA community, people that are in part of this room. Firstly, at home, when you are coming out, it doesn't mean that it's not the time to part. That's the one thing that most of the LGBTQI community might want to do. That when you come out today, they're spoken of giving time of acceptance, but also most important is not the time to part. It's not that when you come out at home, it's now your time to be free. As much as you want to be free, you want to get freedom, but also remember that like every next person next to you, you are still a child of that house. That is important. Also, parents, accept us.
To echo the comment from the
because we have stated
if we can all take this conversation, so each one sitting here can have this conversation with one other person when you leave today, then I think we multiply the knowledge, the love, and also the understanding. So I think that's the important thing, is that these conversations don't stay in these kinds of spaces. But just the fact that people came, I'm shocked on a Wednesday morning for a conversation like this is very impressive. So I think in some way we're preaching to the converted or the choir, but there also might be people here for whom there's new information. But if you can have this conversation with someone else today, I think then we'll go a long way in changing attitudes. And hopefully in the next 10 years, when the survey is done again, the needle is moving even.
And can you please give yourself a round of applause? And then, can you give me a round of applause?
Beautiful conversation. You know, we do things like research and we publish reports, not for the sake of having nice numbers, but for the sake of inspiring precisely the kind of exchange of ideas and experiences that we saw here today. So thank you for allowing this moment. I hope everyone here today was moved by something. I surely was. So thank you, Pierre, for leaving us with that thought. I just wanted to encourage everyone here to become familiar with the work that is done, the research work specifically that is done by the other foundation. You can check our website, you can see the report and the full findings there. We will be releasing more information in the next few months, specifically the breakdown of the findings by province, which I think many of you will be interested in seeing. There are organizations here that are very much involved with different communities in KZN, so I believe you will be interested in seeing what the findings say about the province. So stay tuned for that. Before I call our co-hosts to give us the last final words, I noticed from the attendance sheet that there are a couple of people that don't want to be photographed. Unfortunately, we don't know you, so please, if you don't want to be photographed, find the photographers at the end of the room, let them know, and then please take note and will not use any of the photos where the people appear in any kind of publication. So with that, please do that soon, otherwise you may see yourself online.
Yeah, I have something short, right? With that, I think it's important for me to first, acknowledge, and I think I echo the words of the Methodists who are sitting at the back, to say that the family has become one of the most contested spaces in society. And, you know, also if we look at what is happening in Africa, in South Africa, and across the world, we are witnessing the rise of an anti-rights and anti-gender movement that has also positioned the family as the front line of its politics. Because these people know that if they conquer the family, they have conquered society. Because remember that at the family level, that is where we get socialized about which lives matter. This is where we get socialized about race, about immigration, about which sexual orientations matter or are important. So if the family is conquered and captured, that is the end of humanity. So, and I think this is also the reason why we have to acknowledge the importance of the panel, the importance of the research, and the importance of this space, right? And maybe the question we need to ask ourselves is, what kind of families do we want to build in order for South Africa to be a country or a society where everyone is embraced, no matter how they identify or what they look like and all of that. And I ask this question because for organizations like Uthingo Network, every week or sometimes every day, we continue to meet young people who have been chased out of their family for how they identify or for who they fall in love with. And we continue to support these young people. But we also meet parents who struggle to accept their children. And we also realize that sometimes parents struggle because they don't have the right information. And we've also realized that sometimes what it takes is creating a space like this one. And parents move from talking about abstract ideas, and now the conversation becomes about my child, my daughter, or my family member, and so forth. I think another thing which pushes us to work with the family or the family space is that, like I think Rodika also mentioned with her study, and everyone was at the panel, is that if families embrace diversity, that has a very critical outcome or impact on the lives of queer children or any other child who may be marginalized in society. And again, families are the mirrors at which we see ourselves. So if the family mirrors rejection, or the mirror is one that does not accept you, then we know what are the outcomes for queer children, it could be for children living with, who are differently able. So, Tosh, we need to speak about diversity as a whole. I think that's a critical approach we need to take. Another thing is that we also need to understand that families are where, like I mentioned earlier on, our first allies are either gained or lost. So we should never ever forget families, and it's easy for us to forget the family space when you do the things that we do. So as we come to the end, I don't want to waste time before lunch. I would like to express my sincere appreciation to everyone who's made today possible. Thank you to the other foundation, for commissioning this research. In other contexts, this research will always be a pipe dream, but thank you for making sure that it happens. And to the Human Sciences and Research Council, thank you for providing the evidence. We always get asked questions, but where's the evidence? What are the numbers? And what is very interesting with this research is that we are also counted. So from now on we can give stats to say, oh, by the way, in South Africa we have approximately, about 2.1 million. I think if you engage with the research, you will see that we have stats now which we can use in our advocacy efforts. And then to the Seth Mukitimi Methodist Seminary, maybe I should also come out to say, I was once a Methodist. And coincidentally, has to be in the Wesley Guild, so this has no significance, it's just a coincidence. But what I've realized, Bishop, is that, and I may sound controversial, but in most cases, our churches tolerate us. They don't accept us. They tolerate us, and mostly you get tolerated if you become celibate. The moment you say you want to get married, the narrative changes. And one of the reasons why I dropped out of the church, there were many reasons, but one of the reasons was that I knew that I wanted to get married, and there was no way that I was going to remain in a church that was not going to bless my marriage. It shows that you can't say you accept, but there are still nitty-gritties that we need to deal with. Pierre, thank you so much for moderating the panel. It takes guts, right? Thank you so much for doing it graciously. To the Honorable Nontombego Boyce, I'm not sure if I've said this before, but we also, tend to ignore the weight that comes with being an ally. And you are an ally in a space that is very contested. And we always celebrate allies, but we also don't provide sometimes the acknowledgement to say thank you, because we understand the backlash that you face in your space. But for you to constantly show up and speak up and amplify our voices in the legislature and beyond, we don't take that for granted. Thank you so much for being here today. You could have been anywhere, and you could have been anywhere, but you chose to be here. Siaboma, thank you so much. So Neville mentioned the team on network and the work that we do. I also want to acknowledge other actors in the room to say we cannot do the work on our own. We have other organizations. We have Ujama, we have the KZNCC, we have Transhope, we have Ilora here in PMB, we have UMC has left, the Durban Gay Lesbian Center, and we have the Institute for the Healing of Memories. We have a lot of actors, right? I just want to say that it is a collective effort. Yes, the research has shown us the progress, but we are not there yet. So let us not relax, but let us take the research as, I think, as a symbol of hope to say, our efforts are finally showing. But let us not get, caught sleeping, because the anti-gender movement is coming. And it really works at a very well sophisticated, approach. So we shouldn't be caught sleeping on the job, but we need to continue doing the work. So if there is one message I would like us to take away today, is that change begins close at home, right? The home front is very important. The home front is where prejudice can be inherited, but it is also a place where acceptance can begin. So I think what we need to take away is that we should not, again, ignore the family space, because that is where, the societies that we want to build can begin. Thank you so much. Siyabulela, I'm not sure if I've taken some of your words. If I have, I'm so sorry. I think it's the addiction of the pulpit. But thank you so much for being here on a Wednesday, and travel safe. Thank you.
Once again, thank you to Brian for that wonderful word of closing remarks. Before I make general announcements, I would like to to call in Raymond from the Dennis Hurley Center to make a short announcement.
People don't want it to end. Well, it doesn't need to, because we are convening the same kind of conversation tomorrow in Durban at the Dennis Hurley Center at 11 o'clock. We will also have a presentation of the results and a panel discussion with a different group of panelists. You're all welcome. If you can't get to Durban, but you have friends or colleagues in Durban who want to come, then please tell them about it. If you want more information, then come and see me afterwards, and I'll give you more information tomorrow at 11 at the Dennis Hurley Center, which is right by opposite the fish market in the middle of Durban.
I think one of the things that I would like to emphasize that Brian has made mention of is the idea that our faith is at the heart of what we see in the world around us. It is our faith that has been used in many a times to instill hatred, to instill prejudice. It has been our faith which has been used to oppress people. It has been the faith that has been used to other and to shun others. And so it becomes important, equally important, that when forces of darkness use the words of family as their congregation or congregating tool for the expression of further hatred in the world, that we as people of Christ must reject that. It is also important that we understand that our faith is not just ours, and that it belongs to that which is greater than us, that which has created us in their image, that which has created us with human dignity. And it is that human dignity that we must always work to cherish. And lastly, it is in the home where we learn to be. It is in the home where we learn to be. And so the homes we create and the homes we allow are a reflection not only of society, but of our faith. And so may we, as we continue with this journey, may we hold fast to that one central idea and one of the greatest commandments: love one another as you have loved yourself. Thank you very much. A very somber announcement before I ask the Bishop to lead us in a closing prayer. There will be a light lunch served after this at the back there. But also, I want us to be we had made plans for about 80 people. And last time I did a count, we were over 102. And so my plea is that we be mindful of how we engage with the lunch, because we have had more people than we had anticipated. And so, Bishop, I would like to ask you at this moment to lead us in the closing prayer.
Okay, we'll request Reverend Duma.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for your identity that you have shared with us through your Son, and that you keep on enlightening us through your Holy Spirit.
may we share in this identity and become a home to everyone who needs your identity. We thank you for the progress you have done in all our activism under the banner of the human rights and human identity. May you bless our stakeholders and everyone who is involved. May you give them courage not to keep quiet, but to praise your name and praise your blessings that you have bestowed unto them. Bless the food we are about to eat and be considerate of those who have not. In Jesus' name, amen.